I'm Narayan Liu, and I'm talking about the national security law and its impact on Hongkongers here in Sweden as well as Hongkongers in Hong Kong.
My name is Leia Gokul. I'm originally from Hong Kong. I was born and raised there, and I moved here 8 years ago. And today we're talking about the situation in Hong Kong and how that affects me and other Hong Kongers who are lucky enough to be here.
When I was growing up in Hong Kong, it was, well, for me and my family, it was still a difficult place. That being said, I still felt a sense of freedom. I was free to say and do and think what I wanted and be and strive to be whatever I wanted. And I know that just from seeing the news and talking to some of the friends that I still have in Hong Kong, that's not the place this is anymore, or that was anymore.
The main difference that I see, I mean, I haven't been back since I moved here, but the main difference that I see is the total corrosion of democracy, I think. And, you know, the way freedom has been taken away from the people and the way people have to suddenly be worried about what they talk about. And, you know, whether it's in person or if it's like on social media, I think, you know, there's this fear that penetrates the city, and I've never seen that before.
Jag är från Hongkong och jag kom till Sverige för mer än 10 år sedan. Men innan jag kom till Sverige, jag alltid bott i Hongkong. Jag föddes där. Så när man ser vad som händer i Hongkong, alltså, det är ju otroligt. Man ser att det ändrar så snabbt och att läget har blivit så dåligt nu. Så när man tittar på TV, alltså, nu för tiden, regeringen kan fängsla vem som helst på grund av det här national security law.
So the national security law was introduced on June 30th last year, 2020. The way they drafted it and imposed it in Hong Kong, it took only a few weeks actually. So it was abnormally fast, and no one was allowed to see it for a while. It didn't even have an English translation, which most Hong Kong legislation, they are available in English. This one wasn't. It criminalizes acts of secession, subversion, terrorism, and collusion with foreign forces, which superficially, from the outside, it looks like, you know, things that other countries criminalize anyway. But the way it's applied, it's wide. The terms are vaguely defined so that the authorities can just arrest people under the national security law any way they see fit, for whatever reason they see fit. So waving a flag, that's inciting secession or subversion of the national security law. Participating in interviews with foreign journalists, that's collusion with foreign forces. So in this way, it stifles a lot of the freedoms that people in Hong Kong used to enjoy. And everyone has a right to the freedom of expression, freedom of speech. These things are criminalized now, effectively, by this national security law. Things like, you know, forcing politicians and journalists and civil servants and even teachers now to swear an oath that they will support the Hong Kong government or, you know, or Beijing, and that they'll teach the public what it is the government wants them to think and know. That's a very different place than the Hong Kong I grew up in. Yeah, people could go out and protest however they saw fit. And you compare it to now, when these kids, last year, they were arrested for holding blank pieces of paper in a shopping mall as a form of protest. You can't put up Lenin walls anymore, which you could. You can't even, there are specific slogans that you can't even use anymore because they will arrest you. Liberate Hong Kong, revolution of our time, that's an illegal slogan. And people have been arrested for that. People have been arrested for waving the flag around. These freedoms that people have everywhere else in other democratic countries. We don't have that anymore.
不過令我覺得要離開香港嘅係因為我對香港已經冇咗信心，因為即係中共嘅管治令到香港已經係同以前唔同咗，同埋轉變嘅速度快到係唔可以用正常嘅想像去諗。 Alltså det man tänker på, jag bodde i Hongkong i så många år. Det var, för mig jag var jätteledsen att de tittar på de här ändringarna. Vi hade ett väldigt bra system. När man tänker på alltså korruption, är väldigt låg korruption i Hongkong och vi är ganska fritt att uttrycka oss. Alltså, vi tänker inte på, alltså, vi behöver inte oroa oss när man kritiserar regeringen. Men nu, allt dessa, alltså det försvinner. Vilket tycker jag är en katastrof. Det är ju inom bara 2-3 år, alltså det kan ändra så mycket. Alltså sådana saker, jag uppskattar mycket i Hongkong men nu de finns inte kvar. När man tänker på folket där, de beter sig annorlunda just nu. De vågar inte liksom uttrycka sig. Till exempel min mamma, när jag ringer, alltså min pappa, mamma och pratar om lite känsligt ämne. De vill bara stänga fönster. De vill inte liksom låta andra lyssna. Alltså det hände inte förut när jag var i alltså min barndom. När man lever i en liv och inte kan uttrycka sig och lever i en rädsla. Så det är det som påverkar direkt då. Och sen när man tänker på alltså, de här media, de vågar inte berätta sanningen, de vågar inte liksom, de vet att vissa saker, regeringen gjorde fel, de vågar inte säga någonting. Och allmänheten, de kan inte få sanningen. Det är det som det här nationella säkerhetslagen påverkar också.
I am afraid to go back to Hong Kong because of this new law that has come out. It basically, removes every right that I am able to enjoy, that I have enjoyed in the past, and it kind of makes you more aware of the rights that you have now. And like, for example, I wouldn't be able to talk about, the criticisms that I have about, the Chinese government or like the law, for example. I wouldn't really be able to talk about that openly there, and I feel like that's a huge freedom, that's taken away from me. So I wouldn't want to go back and, be limited in that way, and I wouldn't want to have to go back and be scared of saying the wrong thing in public or talking to the wrong person because you don't know who supports who. I feel like I risk maybe being jailed or I risk being punished, for having the political views that I have, and, being against China and the government because I openly am. Like, that's not a secret, and and as long as I have the right to talk about it, I'm not going to pretend that I don't feel that way because I really do. And I feel like in that way I'm affected. My brother is an activist here, and he faces more risks than I do, definitely. And I feel like I face these risks by association to him. And I know he met a journalist who's in Sweden. He's for Expressen. He writes for Expressen, and he was threatened, after being at a manifestation that my brother was at. He was there with him. So I feel like that's kind of like a way that I can see directly that, we are affected by this.
Alltså när man tänker på vad vi har gjort i Sverige, alltså jag skrev massa olika kommentarer, alltså kritiserar regeringen. Och då man blir osäker. Och nu jag sitter här och framför den här intervjun. Så att man blir orolig att åka tillbaka. Jag kan bli fängslad, alltså bli arresterad vid flygplatsen. De kan skicka mig till fängelse. Jag tror inte, jag tror alla vill inte sitta i fängelse helt enkelt. Och sen när man tänker på att jag fortfarande har släktingar i Hongkong. Man vet aldrig hur de hanterar mina släktingar om de inte tycker om mig. Till exempel när man tittar på Ted Hui. Inte bara han som påverkar utan att hans föräldrar blir påverkade också. Deras bankkontor blir avspärrad. Sådana saker. Alltså, det är ju osäkert. Man vet inte vad de ska göra.
So all of these different things, this national security law especially, it's allowing only pro-Beijing supporters to live, I say freely, but it's not really freedom. A lot of the things I've done already, they could be seen as, violating this national security law. So back in March 2020, Befria Hong Kong, we hosted a delegation that included Ted Hui, he was the former leader of the Democratic Party, and Wong Yik-mo and several others, politicians from Hong Kong. Ted Hui, he's in exile right now in Australia. And me having spent as much time as I did with him talking about these things. He was in a webinar with us recently. That as well, I don't know what they'd slap on it exactly, but that I can imagine they'd say it was something like colluding with foreign forces, for example, because of what we were doing, or inciting secession or whatever. Yeah. So a lot of these things, it puts me and the people I know at risk. If we don't maintain, if a lot of the people that I'm associated with, they don't maintain some level of anonymity, that's dangerous. Freedom of speech and using that freedom in Sweden. Everything we do, it's, again, from holding these demonstrations and chanting these slogans, that is illegal in Hong Kong. And the national security law covers things that Hong Kongers do outside of the special administrative region. So expressing ourselves, it's dangerous even here for us.
Being here in Sweden right now and during the protests, and after this law was enforced, it definitely feels safer than being there. It definitely feels safer than being in Hong Kong now. But at the same time, I can't say that I feel completely secure because I still, I don't have a residence permit right now, so I feel like I'm kind of in between things. And I know that Sweden doesn't recognize Hong Kong refugees in the way that, the US does, or Australia, or Germany, and New Zealand, and the UK. They have openly said that they will accept people who are trying to flee Hong Kong, and Sweden isn't one of those countries, so I don't really know how to feel completely safe and feel like I'm protected from China and that law, which does apply to everyone in the world.
咁我仲有屋企人喺香港工作生活緊，我最怕唔係去搞中國政府去拉我，我最怕係去搞我嘅屋企人，因為呢個方法佢用咗都幾十年㗎。
A lot of the other activists that I've worked with and journalists that I've worked with, they have received direct threats from the Chinese embassy here in Sweden. And again, the embassies can act however they want, and no one's going to do anything about it. Or at least that's how it's appeared up until now. The Chinese ambassador, Gui Kongyu, former, I should say, he just openly threatened Kurdo Baxi, for example, for holding a demonstration outside of the Chinese embassy that I was a part of. He threatened the Swedish journalist, Yo-Yo Olsen. They're just sending these threatening emails, just trying to scare them into ceasing their activity or ceasing their coverage. For Yo-Yo Olsen, it was you should cease your coverage of China or suffer the consequences, or something along those lines. It was something similar for Kurdo, I can't remember the exact phrasing.
Well, I think I'm biased saying that I would like Sweden to, recognize the severity of the situation in Hong Kong and understand that we need a place, we need several places, to seek refuge from the undemocratic government that is now taking over Hong Kong, and I wish that, or I hope rather, that Sweden, does one day recognize it soon and say that it will help you, and not just criticize the government in the small ways that they have.
I feel that I should be safe here just because Sweden, because of what I've seen, and partly because of how Sweden likes to view itself as this paragon of human rights. I feel as though I should feel safe and secure here, but the truth is that even though Sweden has taken many steps, symbolic actions against China, like closing down the Confucius Institutes or ending sister city agreements, it's not enough. And they seem hesitant to actually take a stand and take action to show that they're not willing to support the Chinese Communist Party and its human rights abuses, its erosion of democracy in Hong Kong, its threatening of Swedish nationals, its kidnapping of Swedish nationals. I absolutely think Sweden should reevaluate its approach to Hong Kong activists, former protesters, and politicians. They should grant asylum to them, I think, for those in need. They could offer a lifeboat scheme. They could turn to the UK, for example, or Germany, or Canada, or the US, or any one of the other countries, even within Europe, that have taken action, like clear action, to support Hongkongers who are fleeing from the national security law.